So we always know that many serial killers collect twisted, chilling souvenirs or trophies from the scenes of their crimes. These trophies can be anything from a lock of the victim's hair to either personal belongings like a driver's license, jewelry, or clothing. So we'll state a warning before I start the video and say some of these pictures can be disturbing, so just be warned. Coming in at number 9, we have Regina Walters, and I did cover it in a different video, but for those of you that don't know, Regina Walters was kidnapped by serial killer Robert Ben Rhodes, who would normally stalk the highways of Texas in his mobile torture and death chamber. He was a long-haul truck driver, and he converted the sleeper cab of his 18-wheel semi-truck into a small makeshift sex chamber where he would torture his victims. Eventually, he would kill them in the most brutal manner imaginable. In this picture of Regina Walters, he made her shave her head and made her put on this dress before he took this picture of her, and after shortly killing her. Coming in at number 8, we have Harvey Glatman. So Harvey Glatman was truly frightening and a twisted serial murderer in the late 1950s. Sometime around 1957, Glatman posted Lonely Hearts adverts in newspapers to lure his victims, in addition to prowling modeling agencies in Los Angeles. As eventually posing as a photographer himself, he then lured hopeful models back to his apartment in order to take their portraits, only to tie them up and rape them. Glatman would then strangle them and hide the bodies in the desert, all while taking pictures of his victims up until the moment before they lost their lives. Each victim appeared terrified and desperate, and you could see from this picture how sick it is. These women he had tied up, that was really his victims. This is not acting, this is not a pose that he did. He really had them tied up like this before he ended up killing them. But he was finally arrested in 1958 after an attempted abduction of Lorraine Vigil, who was seen trying to escape her would-be killer's grasp. When he got questioned by police, he willingly confessed to his past kidnappings and murders, and later revealing his toolbox, which contained all the chilling photos of the victims. Coming in at number 7, we have William Richard Bradford. So William Richard was sentenced to death in California for the murders of his 15-year-old neighbor Tracy Campbell and a Los Angeles bartender named Sherry Miller in 1984. So in 1984, Bradford met Sherry at a bar that she worked at, and he told her that he was a professional photographer who can help her build her modeling portfolio. He took her to a remote campsite where she posed for him, then he strangled her to death. Bradford then sliced off her tattoos and ditched the body in an alley. Shortly after murdering Miller, Bradford convinced Campbell, his teenage neighbor, that he can also help her become a model, and he took her out to the desert campsite, the same place where he did lure Miller, his first victim. He photographed the neighbor moments before strangling her. Bradford was caught after it was discovered that he was the last person to see both victims alive. After 18 years on death row, police discovered 54 photographs of unidentified women that belonged to Bradford, including photos of Miller in various modeling poses, and you guys can see from these pictures here are the pictures that he took, sadly, before he ended up killing her. Coming in at number 6, we have Robert Berdella. So Robert Berdella, also known as the Kansas City Butcher, was a serial killer and torturer who documented his sinister slangs in photographs. Between 1984 and 1987, he murdered at least 6 men in Kansas, Missouri. After befriending his victims, sometimes offering them money or lodging, he kidnapped them and physically tormented them for days and weeks on end. In the photographs, 334 Polaroids and 34 photo prints, the bodies of his victims were then dismembered and either burned in his backyard or left in bags for the garbage crew to pick up. Berdella was caught after his victim, a 22-year-old male named Christopher Bryson, escaped on his 4th day of captivity. Bryson managed to break free from his restraints, jump from a 2nd floor window, wearing nothing more than a dog collar around his neck. And you can see this picture of one of his victims, and it's definitely disturbing, one of the most disturbing I've ever seen. Coming in at number 5, we have Jerry Brudos. So serial killer and necrophile Jerry Brudos was known as the Lust Killer for his perverse attraction to his victims. He killed them in cold blood, oftentimes while wearing women's clothing. Between 1968 and 1969, he murdered 4 young women and attempted to attack 2 others in Oregon. Sometime in May of 1968, Brudos dressed as a woman and abducted an 18-year-old girl named Karen Sprinkler, who is in this picture that you're looking at now. He abducted her from a shopping mall parking lot and later photographed her in his garage just hours before her murder. He made her pose in lingerie he had bought and then strangled her before dumping the body. At number 4, we have Dean Corll. He was given the nickname the Candyman and the Pied Piper, as he would use candy to lure his vulnerable victims into a false sense of security. Corll was assisted by 2 teenage accomplices, David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, both teenagers who would help him bury their victims in various parts of Texas. But his reign of terror came to an end August 7, 1973, when Henley fatally shot Corll during one of his kidnappings. Corll was telling one of the teenage boys to rape one of the two victims he abducted, but instead Henley murdered Coral with a .22 caliber pistol in an act of self-defense. His accomplices Brooks and Henley were sentenced to life imprisonment because of their roles. The picture you are seeing now is his 29th victim, which was uncovered by a filmmaker, and the boy appears to be scared as he's looking up at the camera while wearing handcuffs. Coming in at number 3, we have Anatoly Slivko. Soviet serial killer Anatoly played a disturbing game with his victims in an attempt to recreate his own twisted fantasy. In his early 20s, he witnessed a traffic accident that fatally injured a young boy wearing his Young Pioneers uniform. The gruesome scene of the dead young pioneer sexually excited him. Slivko started running a local children's club and took advantage of his position in the most sinister way imaginable. In order to satisfy his fantasies, Slivko would form close friendships with the local boys, usually around the ages of 12 and 15. But never older than the age of 17. He would then lure them to the woods, and he would trick his victims into believing that he was doing an experiment. He would then hang the boys from the tree until they were unconscious. Once unconscious, he would strip them naked, fondle them, and film them in suggestive positions. He also took photographs of the victims as they were suffocating. More than 40 boys were molested by Slivko, and he was unable to revive 7 of them, leading to their deaths. So because of the photos that he took, it was enough to charge him, and he was executed by firing squad on September 16, 1989. Number 2, we have Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm sure a lot of you have seen a lot of documentaries on Jeffrey Dahmer, especially the one on Netflix. So you guys probably know about all these cases already. So there are some images that you should never search for online. A collection of Polaroids was discovered on the day Jeffrey Dahmer got arrested, when they discovered a man named Tracy Edwards roaming the streets with handcuffs dangling from his wrist. Edwards told police that a weird dude in a nearby apartment had put them on him, and they escorted him to the address, which was the residence of Dahmer. When an officer went into the bedroom to find keys for the handcuffs, he noticed photographs of dismembered human bodies lying around. When Dahmer noticed that one of the officers was holding some of the Polaroids of his victims, he ended up fighting with them in an effort to resist arrest. As Jeffrey Dahmer was pinned to the ground, one of the officers opened the refrigerator and revealing a severed head of a man on the bottom shelf. Dahmer then said, "For what I did, I should be dead." And this picture you see here is one of his victims or potential victims lying handcuffed on the bed. Coming in at number 1, we have the unsolved Polaroid. So on September 20th, 1988, 19-year-old Tara disappeared near her home in New Mexico. When she failed to return from a regular bike ride, what was believed to have been a kidnapping soon evolved into a potential serial killer case after a chilling Polaroid was uncovered. 9 months later, a woman discovered a Polaroid in good condition 1,600 miles away in Florida. It showed 2 apparent victims with their arms behind their backs and tape over their mouth. The young woman looked identical to Tara, and the boy was believed to be Michael Henley of New Mexico, who went missing 6 months before Tara did. Parents of both of the victims were convinced that it was them, but sadly in 1990, it was discovered that the boy in the photograph was not Michael, as his remains were found and his death had been a tragic accident. The questions surrounding the Polaroid are still unanswered. One of the most chilling theories online is that this was a photo from another serial killer's collection that would possibly never get solved. Hopefully this video wasn't too depressing. Make sure you guys go watch something to cheer you up after this, because I know this video is probably pretty dark to see. That being said though, if you did enjoy the content, found it interesting, and you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe, hit that thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next video.